My background is I've been in public relations at international levels for a long time. I ran an international healthcare PR agency in London for about 11 years, where we were the European hub. We worked across the board in healthcare, from pharmaceuticals to charity clients, a real mix of work, where we were often interpreting information that was coming in from global clients in order to translate that information to, at one end of the spectrum, to patient groups, and obviously at the others to healthcare professionals and policy players. So if you look at our website, it gives you a bit of a flavour of what Minerva is all about. But just to say that a lot of our work is almost hidden. Quite often when we're working with clients, people don't know that actually Minerva is working with that client, because we become, if you like, absorbed into that client's team. So everything goes out under the name of the client rather than Minerva. Apologies to Virginia and Sylvia, I couldn't find the proper photographs this morning. As I said earlier, my computer kept crashing. Why does it always do that at exactly the wrong time? So at the minute we are a 6-strong employed team, but we have a very large cohort of associates and other specialists who join us dependent on the projects and the clients in hand. And we provide the comprehensive range of services across public relations, from stakeholder engagement, media management, policy contact programs, where we identify the right people for either industries or charities, to identify the right people to talk to ensure that the issue that is in top of mind gets on the agenda, gets some airing, and is obviously then dealt with. But we also do an awful lot of capacity development in most of the projects that we get involved in. Some of the charities that we've worked for example, we actually are hired specifically to mentor and support maybe 1 or 2 team members, so that we actually devise our work programme to work our way out rather than work our way in, which is, I think, an important principle for what we do. So our clients and our projects range from EU-funded research projects, which I'll tell you a little bit more about, because this topic of sustainability is such a huge one, and one we've been involved in really for the last 15 years. But we also work obviously for UK-based, European and indeed international clients and organisations, from universities. We've worked with universities directly with different teams, and indeed with SMEs and startups, particularly in the areas where we've had particular expertise. I'll tell you a little bit about one which I think is one of the most interesting and maybe impactful areas we've worked on, in the area of alternative protein. So in terms of Minerva itself, based here in Andover, we've been established now for 10 years. The company that I ran up in London basically became ripe for takeover. It was 11–15 million turnover company. And as happens with all these agencies, they get eaten up by other agencies. So our agency, which was very successful across the healthcare board, we were taken over basically to kill because we were too much competition. So that's interesting, but it allowed me to, if you like, come out of that London, stop commuting to London anyway. Seem to have done an awful lot of commuting everywhere else in the world, but to London anyway, to establish Andover, in Andover. I lived in Monkston to begin with, and as with many companies, it started in the double garage. But we've been now at Base Point now for 10 years. So as I said, communications is at our heart. So project management really. And for this situation, interestingly, and unlike many people, 90% of our work remains completely unchanged. In the sense that we've always worked, online. Obviously, if we've got global or European clients, then that's the way we communicate. That's the way we run our projects. That's the way we run most of our meetings. But as we know, online most of the time only goes so far. And obviously meetings have been an important part of, meeting face-to-face has been an important part of that work. So that's an area really that has changed a lot in that obviously travel has been out of the question, particularly to Europe, where a lot of our projects are run from. So as a business, we have obviously our own sustainability policies and initiatives which we're striving to deliver, but we are in serviced offices, so actually that gives us limited control over those central facilities. Although I did lobby very hard for our electric power-up points in Base Point, which we've now got. But we do obviously have control over those things, you know, that are in our own remit, such as supplies, and of course trying to be as economic with our travel as possible. So in terms of arrangements going forward, literally we have one person going into the office on an occasional basis, and virtually the rest of the team we're working from home. But we have obviously regular online team and bilateral meetings. We use the GoToMeeting and GoToWebinar system, which we've had actually for years. We've always done a lot of webinars where we are supporting people, whether it's in a team or whether it's individually. We've run webinars which are now so popular for a very long time. But I mean, obviously I'm, if you like, the team leader, and I guess, you know, the buck still continues to stop with me. So as anybody who runs a small business knows, you're never alone with your own business. There's always something to think about, always something to do. And when you think you've finished the day's work in terms of the projects that you're involved in, there's still the staff to pay, there's still the VAT to think about, there's still the, you know, any legal things that you need to think about. One of the things I'm going to tell you a little bit about in a little while is actually the webinar series that we've been running, which I think we're growing in popularity, and it's giving, if you like, other members of the team who haven't had such experience in running webinars to do just that, which I think is important. Particularly as a small team, you need to be able to rely on virtually any member of the team to step in when it's required. So we have quite a long heritage now of, if you like, our bio-based journey in terms of the projects that we've been involved in. And I'll give you a little bit of a flavour of some of those. And a number of the European and global projects that we are and have been involved in are definitely on topic, working within you know, the wider agenda of the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. One project that actually hasn't started yet, but we've had our first meetings around, starts in September, is an African project based in the Sahel. The Sahel area, for those who don't know, is one of the driest and most difficult areas in the world. It's part of Mali, Burkina Faso, Senegal, going across to Malawi, Ethiopia, across that whole range. And I'm delighted that we, with a consortium, won this project, because potentially it has the potential to have enormous impact. This is the area where a lot of the economic migration into Europe comes from. Families are so desperate because they're not earning a living on the land that they always used to, are sending their children off on that terrible journey up to North Africa and trying to get across then to Europe. So we really are hoping, we have great hopes for this project. Another one I'll tell you a little bit about is another one that's recently started called Bovine, which is looking at the sustainability of beef farming. We'll all be aware that beef farming is obviously under a lot of pressure. From the UK's perspective, we've switched a lot of our attention to grass-fed, sustainable beef a long time, quite a few years ago. But it's a challenge in terms of price, in terms of process, in terms of market. Because as we're all aware, I'm sure that the whole vegan area and vegetarian, vegan, or less meat drive is really with us. One project that is continuing at the moment is called Bio Voices, which is focused on seeking out what are the real challenges to a lack of progress in bio-based products and materials being utilised, the no ability to scale up a lot of the amazing innovations that are available. So this project, it's across 9 countries with a UK partner, so we're gathering views from academia, from industry, from investors, from policymakers and the public about what are seen to be the main challenges to that. Protein insect is, as I mentioned just now, very interesting. It's all based on flies, and I'll tell you a bit more about that in a minute. CombiBiz was a project that I coordinated. It's the first one that I've actually coordinated, a European project. And this was focused on supporting researchers working across the bioeconomy, or what is now more commonly known as the bio-based circular economy, making their voices heard with the stakeholders that they needed to talk to. Scientists, researchers are not very good usually at talking to other people or selecting the material that they need to transmit or transfer to other agencies, to other sectors, in order to ensure that those ideas actually come to life. And then ComNet was based completely on communication training for researchers working across the bioeconomy for that very purpose, to make their voice heard in the sectors that need to be heard. So just as a quick illustration, this is bovine, just to say that with each of our projects, what we actually do and deliver varies according to the project needs. Usually we take on the role of what they call the communications and dissemination partner. So that means we are looking at communications more widely, identifying the targeted, strategic, most relevant stakeholder groups with which to communicate. And then the dissemination side is much more about transferring precise knowledge to those who are going to use that knowledge. And in many of the areas of sustainability, that's the policy players, you know, whether they're working at a local level, a regional level, or an international level, even European, definitely, of course. Don't ask me, please. You may want to. I may refuse to answer. The B word. Anyway, so this is another B word. This is bovine. And for this project, we're doing a lot of very practical things. We actually are building the website. We're actually delivering the website. We're actually creating what's known as their knowledge hub, where these expert partners across Europe, and the experts are the farmers, the people who are actually doing this job day in, day out, are sharing their expertise, sharing their knowledge in order to help bring many other players hopefully up to speed with the latest technologies, for example, but also the latest feeding techniques. I mean, one big area that's had a lot of coverage is obviously the methane emissions, which, just so that people, I'm sure you all know this, but it's nothing to do with farts, it's to do with burps. And there's a lot of work that's been going on for a very long time to reduce those emissions very, very successfully. So that's one. And this is just a little snapshot of a few others. And I've put the websites there that anybody, obviously, you're sharing the slides afterwards, then people can have a look at them. So below that list, you can see there is the couple of videos that we created as part of the Protein Insect project. Now, the Protein Insect project was an amazing project. We had partners in China, we had partners in Africa, as well as in 3 European countries, and indeed in the UK. It was coordinated out of the UK by what was then known as FERA, which is it's a scientific advisory and testing based up in York. And Elaine, who you can see there in the bottom video, she was the coordinator. And what did this do? What did this project do? It looked at the potential of protein from flies, domestic flies and black soldier fly, in order to breed the larvae of those flies, in order to then extract the protein from those larvae. And that larvae is an amazing source of protein. About 85% is protein, and the rest are also very valuable added products such as chitin, which are used in lots and lots of different applications, and oil, which can be used for various things. So this project actually bred the flies in those different locations in Africa and China, in Europe, including the UK. And then the resultant protein was then tested for safety and quality. And the results of the project were then shared with EFSA, which is the European Food Safety Agency, which is, if you like, at a European level, which of course DEFRA and all our agencies feed into, or they did do. Goodness knows how it's all going to work going forward. And it demonstrated that you can produce very, very, very good high quality protein, very suitable for animal feed. Now, we focused on animal feed. Remember, we put our proposal in, good 7 years ago, I suppose, because it takes about a year from proposal submission to get started. And as you'll probably be aware, there's been obviously there's an acceleration of an interest in the whole use of insects, both for human consumption as well as for animal feed. But we focused our work on animal feed because we felt it was more achievable in terms of getting to scale. I still don't believe that we'll ever get to a scale that human consumption of insects will be able to take over any other protein sources. Why is this important? It's because Europe is so reliant on soy. And where does that soy come from? It comes from places where they are burning down, taking down rainforest. Now, some of our partners in this were some of the big industry, and certainly working with some of the big industry, there was an absolute acknowledgement that they had to change their focus. And this, I think, has helped to drive an absolute explosion in investment and research throughout the world. And there's definitely scale going on for this. For this project, we looked after not only the wider communications, but we looked after policy. So we were dealing with all the European agencies like DG Sante, and we actually helped to change the policy at European level with this project to allow, at the moment, insect protein is allowed into aquaculture, and they're still debating at the moment poultry. That should have gone through. Late autumn because of everything else. It hasn't. Because obviously everywhere, like everywhere else, even at European Commission level, things have slowed right down. So that's protein insect. Top there is BioVoices, a very interesting website. We don't do the website, as I say, we're UK partners, but look at that, it's got a couple of nice videos. I've just put a picture of the Sahel area in the middle there, although that project's not started, but that gives you an idea about where that one's working. The one below, ComNet, is the one I mentioned that has all the training. And the one on the right is CombiBiz, which is now finished, but all the resources that we created are available and freely available for anybody to look at. There's lots of webinars, lots of interesting material on there that might be of interest to you directly or to other people that you know. So sustainability, it's huge on the agenda. And of course, you can interpret sustainability in so many ways. Obviously, most important for businesses is sustainability of the business. But there is this wider context, of course, going on at the moment about building back better, building back greener, building back more sustainably in terms of thinking much more about the planet, the planetary dimensions, as well as the people dimensions, as well as obviously having to take care of that other P, the profit. But there is an opportunity now, without doubt, to think and act differently. Definitely there's a huge shift in values and expectations in the wider communities. People are expecting now to have a bit more information about, about this, to understand more, which is good. It's a very complex area. When we do, my colleague Virginia works mainly on the BioVoices project, for example, and it's highly complex. How do you balance out, which we're doing at government levels, regional levels, business levels at the moment. How do you balance out between profit, or at least sustaining that level of income together with trying to actually instill more sustainable practices and develop more sustainable products. But the benchmarks that we're all working with, if you like, are these SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which are so closely aligned to the worries about climate change. So we have an opportunity here. But in a way, also, it's also given us more of an opportunity to think more, hopefully more productively, about the well-being in the round, of your organisation, of your people who you're working with, of your supporters if you're a charity, as well as your planet. So we decided to do a little series of webinars, partly to to keep our skills hopefully up in terms of running these things, but also get the team involved. So we decided to set up a little series of 4 webinars. All credit to Amanda, who's our team person who's doing most of the work on these. So well done to her. We've got 4. We've run 2 so far. First one, we had Gerald Fitzgerald from Peabury Coffee. Some of you, I'm sure, will know that. I'm sure some of you have some of his delicious coffee. And Tina and Jim from Oak Track, based at, where's it actually based? Is it Charlton?
Charlton
right by the Hare and Hound. So, say again?
Charlton Down, behind the Hare and Hound.
Charlton Down, that's it. Thank you very much. Who run their small holding on incredibly creditable, sustainable principles. And we heard from them. And then the second one, we were very pleased to be joined by Tim Houghton, who's the CEO of Community First, and Lucy Johnson, who is the CEO of the Army Flying Museum. So these were the first 2. First one was based on food and drink, second on charities, and we've still got 2 to come. One next Monday on hospitality, and the one after that on health and well-being. And the recordings, they're all being recorded and available on the Minerva website. And I think certainly a lot of very interesting initiatives have been shared, a lot of ideas, a lot of sort of principles. Maybe one of the most memorable is you need a plan. And I think with all our projects, you have to start with a plan, but the most important thing is you then need to be adaptable. You have to have the wherewithal and the headspace and the resources, whether it's people or some finance, to actually look at how you might do things, even need to change things to do them even better. It was just a question on these webinars that we posed to people was, what's been the biggest challenge for you and your organisation during lockdown? And it's very interesting to try and get people to just choose one thing, because we know in communications, whenever we're communicating, that is often the hardest task. You cannot say everything to everybody all the time, everywhere. You have to make very hard choices. And for some people on these webinars, I think they found that quite tricky to do. But it might be an interesting thing to perhaps share as to what people think is maybe their own personal challenge, as well as their professional or organisational challenge during these times. And what we asked people to do was just put their answers into the chat box. One of the other things that we asked people to do sort of post the end of the webinar was just to, again, put down, we did it through Mentimeter. I don't know if anybody uses Mentimeter. It's quite an interesting thing to use. You get sort of instant feedback and instant ability to create things like word clouds, and ask people to input the words that for them epitomise what sustainability means for them at the moment. So I'm sorry, I've rabbited on quite a lot, but obviously be very pleased to see if there are any questions.
So thank you, Rhonda. If you'd like to unmute yourself if you have a question to ask, and just go for it. Well, we've got the expert here. I myself, which is your favourite part of your business, Rhonda?
The favourite part? Well, I've been very lucky. One of the things that really here at Minerva, simply because of the way the business is structured, I've been able to give opportunities to quite a number of young people who live in and around Andover,
Oh.
you know, to mentor them and support them, provide them with either short work experience opportunities or indeed to give them, you know, longer periods. And from that, I'd say probably have had 5. So one person sticks in my mind particularly, who she was between school, well, she'd finished school, hadn't quite really thought what she was going to do, and I gave her the opportunity to come and join and work alongside a couple of us. She stayed with us for about 9 months, and then actually went on to university, to a very nice university. Really built her confidence in speaking and communicating, really. So I'm very pleased with that. Others I've had who've been just joined us for a few months between their university years, for example. Others I've had who came to us and then decided to delay university, trying to think very clearly about, do they really want to go to university, which was good. And then we also had 3 now, I think 3. We've had formal, what you might call people who've come to us on secondment from different universities, where they've had to find for themselves a job, if you like, or in a different situation than academia, that will help them obviously take that next step forward into work. So yes, we've had one from the University of East Anglia, we've had one from the University of Southampton, we've had one from the University of Surrey. Most of them, and the topics have actually all been around food, nutrition, or indeed sustainability. One very successful candidate has just finished her PhD, very interesting project she's been involved in, looking at, focused entirely, life has revolved around broccoli, and looking at identifying, different elements of broccoli and why broccoli is such, has such health-giving or potential health-giving properties. And her particular work has now gone into looking at, from a medical perspective, to actually look at treatments for prostate cancer particularly. So I think that from a personal satisfaction viewpoint, I think that's one of the most rewarding, the team, and also the team members who come. Not everybody stays forever, but I think, hopefully most people, sometimes people with us see us as a bit of a stepping stone from one situation to another, which is fine for me, as long as they learn something. And the other thing for me is I always learn from them. I mean, everything we do, we learn. We don't have, I have to say, we have many, many challenging days, as I'm sure my team will say, but we never have boring days. Never, ever have boring days.
That's fantastic. I see that we have a little question in the chat box from Tara. Are there work opportunities even in this current situation?
You mean with Minerva specifically? Is that what's meant, or?
You can unmute yourself, Tara, and ask any questions, interact with Rhonda.
And it's just interesting to hear what you were saying about like work experience and taking on people and things like that. Is that general, or are you still able to offer that sort of thing during this time? Is this time created a nightmare for you, or are you still able to continue with the work that you're doing? Two questions.
No, that's all right. I mean, the big unknown for us, I did mention briefly the B word earlier, but obviously that has changed our generic world, quite significantly in terms of going forward, because we have no idea at the moment how we will be interacting with the next big funding phase, which is called Horizon Europe. We're in this phase of funding at the moment called Horizon 2020. And I have to say that since all of the kerfuffle around Brexit, we've had actually more inquiries for us to join consortia and to get involved, which is very interesting, because because we're communications rather than, if you like, the academic excellence side, if you like, which I have to say that many European universities have not been choosing UK universities as partners, and that's been going on ever since the vote. Yes. And many universities are much poorer because of that, both in terms of their funding streams, but also in terms of the people So that's a big tragedy. But for us, I think because also from a European perspective, they value us because we are native speakers. And English will still remain, you know, the gold standard language. Well, the French might, you know, have a little bit of a hissy fit about it. Not the Germans, but the French may still, I think there is still a little bit of a movement to try and change the official first language to French, but I don't think that will happen. Because certainly in our area, the language is English. So going back to your question, Tara, so in the longer term, I mean, for example, Sustain Sahil's just started. Most businesses cannot say this. Sahil goes on for 5 years. We have funding for 5 years. And most of our projects are either 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years. So from a financial stability viewpoint, that is marvellous. Obviously, in terms of employed numbers, may go up and down a little bit, dependent on which projects are in hand. But no, opportunities still definitely do exist. And I always do try and accommodate, you know, people. It's obviously a bit odd at the moment because the best way for people to get to know about the business is to do hands-on, which means, you know, close communication, being in the office. So in a way, that's what's stopping that kind of interaction more than anything else at the moment. But I have to say, if anybody's got anybody who thinks they might like to have a 2-week experience, just as a little dip in to see whether PR is...
My daughter just arrived back from university yesterday, so...
Ah, what did she study?
She's doing English literature and theology.
Does she like writing?
Oh, that's her favourite. Reading and writing.
We're always looking for writers.
Okay.
Always looking for writers.
How would I
drop me an email? Drop me an email. On the screen, you can use that one.
So the Minerva details there.
On the screen, if you
website link is at the top of the chat window.
Oh, okay.
I think, and if not, it will be going in.
On each of the slides is our office email.
Can we have access to this, Susan?
Yes, the recording will be open to anybody, as I said in the chat window.
Okay.
You know, we will be sharing this around because there's so much valuable information here. I'm quite gutted that we haven't had more people coming along. But you know, we're trying and we're working towards the right thing, and we're lucky to have you today. Are there any more questions from anyone? Would anybody else like to unmute themselves? Oh, Juliet, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah. Very quickly, I'm afraid, because I need to go, I'm afraid.
No, that's right. Just a couple of questions and probably need quick answers. First question, you talked about well-being of people in your slide as a sustainable option. Are you able to briefly share what you mean by that?
Well-being, well, it's good management of your people. I mean, I've always been in a people-oriented business, so I think being able, if you like, to ensure that people have options. I've always run the business very, very flexibly, for example, and one of the things that I've been a little bit more concerned about, I think, in this period is that most of my people we work part-time. But as we know, particularly, you know, if you've got a family, for example, if you work part-time, you're actually doing an awful lot more than than the time is allocated. And I do feel that actually in this time of everything being online, that more of my team have actually done more than is sort of they're paid for, if you like. So hopefully I've put into practice perhaps some ways in which I can ensure that's not happening too much. Although I'm as much at fault as anybody else, you know, forgetting that somebody's on holiday, or because I have insisted that people take time off during this time, you know, that they're actually taking some holiday, because I know for myself I need some just some days where I'm not having to. I probably will, but I'm not having to actually log in and actually do something. So from that very sort of micro perspective, from our perspective, I think that's one of the most important things. And obviously there's a huge amount of, you know, well-being initiatives, you know, going on at the moment. And I do try and pass that on for people to look at different webinars that have been happening and different opportunities. Yeah.
Fabulous.
I'm really sorry. I think I'm going to have to cut off now.
Okay. Kat,
Okay.
looks like the last question. Kat, could I ask you to put your question in the chat box? Because Rhonda really, unfortunately, should have gone at half past. So if you could pop it into the chat box, I'll make sure I share that with Rhonda and you all at a later date. So you will get an answer. But thank you so much for being here, Rhonda, and also to Virginia for being here as well. And we'll carry on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Would everybody like to unmute themselves now? Because we're going to go through our introductions as usual. I hope you found Rhonda very interesting. I did. I've done these Build Back Better webinars, of which said there's 2 more to come, and they're well worth it, very thought-provoking. And I think it will help us in our businesses to understand what their aims are and what they're doing, because this is the way we've all got to go. We've all got to be more sustainable and understand a little bit more how this works. So, Martin, would you like to go first?
You're still recording, sir. You're still recording, sir.
Oh, shall I turn that off now, and then everybody can just talk quite frankly and freely? Thank you so much.